Because Yogananda's life was not that long ago in terms of history, because Swami Kriyananda's life was even more recent, having passed away just over a decade ago, many of us and many people that we know knew Swami Kriyananda deeply and personally and in many, many circumstances. He often stood right where I'm standing and spoke to this temple, and many of you were in the room during those experiences. And then Swami would talk to us about his time with Master and life with Yogananda, what it was like. He wrote about it and he spoke about it very, very often. And because things were filmed and kept, you can just go onto the internet and listen to him talk as vividly as we were able to hear him when he was standing here. As a result of that, at least from my perspective, because Swamiji's consciousness was so expanded and so different from the world the way I saw it, except that we went through the same experiences in this world, driving in the car, going to the restaurant, going into court and being sued, and various things that you had to do that in life, and having money and not having money, and blah, 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 it goes on and on. Even the most elevated stories now that I read about very advanced souls, to me there's always a very, very human element in it. Jesus at the Last Supper in the Bible, he makes a reference to, this being close to the end of his life and so on, and the disciples can't quite figure out exactly what he's saying, so they ask John to ask Jesus a more direct question. And it just, you read all that in the Bible, and now it's so vivid, it's so fixed as scripture that you forget that these were just people really not that different from us, with a very, very good karma to be there with Jesus, and you see it acting out in a very personal way. Somehow or another, John could get away with things that none of the other disciples could get away with. And believe me, I watched that often with Swami. He would respond very, very differently to different people at different times. I often rebelled against things that Swami would say, or I would insist that he explain them to me, and when I was really intent on it, I would just keep after him trying to change his mind. And I remember most of the time he was very patient, but at one point he said to me, "Asha, you always agree with me in the end, so just be quiet." And I thought, oh, okay, he's heard me, he's rejecting it, just accept it. So I'm thinking of this story from the life of the Buddha, which is one of the more beautiful stories. If you really want to read about the Buddha, there's a poetic rendition of his life by Edwin Arnold called The Light of Asia. From the point of view of poetry, it's exquisite. And if you really want to feel the life of the Buddha, it's the most beautiful way to do it. In this story in there, it's told, and this is the story of a woman whose baby died. And since this is the day between the two death anniversaries of Yogananda and his guru Sri Yukteswar, and two of our friends, as I was saying earlier, have passed away in the last few days, I'm thinking of it. So there's a woman, and again, these are real stories of real people. These are not allegories made up by angels. A woman's baby dies. Hard to imagine anything more heartbreaking than that experience, which I know many families have been through. So she does not want to accept that this baby is not going to live. So there's a holy man, we call him now the Buddha. There's a holy man, and holy men have power over life or death. So she carries the body of her child. She's not willing to give up the body of the child. Now think about this. There's probably a father and her parents and other siblings around, and the woman's baby has died. And she is not going to accept that this baby has died. And then also comes into it, oh, I have faith. I have faith in the miracle of God. I have faith in the holy man. So she carries the body of her child to the Buddha and says, my baby has died. And the Buddha is the soul of compassion. And so at first, of course, he must be very sympathetic to her. He's not going to say, oh yeah, he's dead, so what? Happens to lots of people. I mean, nothing like that. You go to God for comfort, so he comforts her. And then she says, make my baby live again. He says, well, I need something to make that happen. So I want you to bring some oil to me, just ordinary oil. Did he ask for olive oil? Who knows? Ordinary oil. He said, and gather from your neighbor some oil. The woman, can you imagine the joy in her heart? This holy man has said, all I have to do is bring him some oil. And the implication, at least, is then my baby will live again. And then just as she's going away, he says, oh yes, but you must gather the oil from a household which has never been touched by death. Oh, well, that's even, I can do that. Anything to make my child live. So then, of course, she goes from house to house to house to house, and everyone is willing to give her oil, but then she says, has this household ever been touched by death? Well, my mother, my ancient mother died. The servant died. The child died. She goes from house to house to house to house. She cannot find anywhere in her village a household that has not been touched by death. And so then, of course, she understands. She understands more deeply than if Buddha had just said to her, well, everybody dies. She goes and she seeks herself for an alternative, another reality than the reality that has touched her. And so finally she comes back. Is she still carrying the body of her child? Has she been willing to put that child down to be cremated? We don't know. But she comes back changed, humbled, and ready not merely to declare what reality is, but now to listen. And then the Buddha can really comfort her because he can comfort her with truth. You can't comfort, you don't really comfort someone when you tell them something that simply isn't so. A woman in our community many years ago was very hurt by the actions of someone that she trusted. And that person did their best, but wasn't perfect, and therefore had their own karma to follow. And the woman was struggling for quite a long time to just sort of come to terms with what had happened. And she came to Swamiji one day, and she felt like, I found a solution. And she says something on the order of, well, they behaved just right. They just did what was meant to be. And Swami said, don't comfort yourself with a lie. He said, they behave very badly. Sometimes you do something and it's not great karma for you. It doesn't really matter because you get to work it out later. He said, don't comfort yourself with a lie. And that's the whole spiritual path. And sometimes we have this impression, Sri Yukteswar's death anniversary is tomorrow. Mahasamadhi, the grand samadhi, when they go into cosmic consciousness and never bother to come back. That's what it's called. And Sri Yukteswar has kind of a bad rap. He's a tough guy. He's tough, and he just tells it like it is. Sri Yogananda says in autobiography, my master was so great, but his manner was a little stern. And if he'd been just a little more tender, he would have been the most popular guru, in all of Bengal. But as it was, many couldn't take it. Swami Kriyananda even tells a crazy story. He said to Master once, he said, when I look in the photograph of Sri Yukteswar, I see so much love in his eyes. And Master said, there was no love in those eyes. But of course, they were guru and disciple. It was a union of spirit. But he didn't comfort in that way. And so we think of that as harsh. But the fact was that Sri Yukteswar just simply, he was a There was no ounce of energy within him, no fragment of energy that was comforting you with a lie. It was your fulfillment, your happiness, your freedom comes when we cease to rebel against that which is. The Sanatana Dharma is the Sanskrit word for the ancient teachings of India, not just of India. Sanatana Dharma is, they call it the eternal religion. That's the definition. But there's another way I've heard it expressed, which I like better, which is simply that which is. It's not anybody's religion. It's simply that which is. If you take a knife and drive it into your hand will bleed and your hand will hurt. Our friends, actually both of our friends who died in the last few days, both of them had cancer. Something happens, the karma is such that the whole body starts doing things that it was not designed to be. I've been told that Master said cancer is a very good way to work out karma. I don't know why specifically he would say that, but it just is, because it challenges all of our expectations. I know very little about the physiology of my own body, but it does what I expect it to do. And then people who are close to me, their bodies stop doing what they expect it to do. And the first sense is we fight against it, and it's not wrong. The medical world, the doctors are also inspired by God to be able to do these things. Dr. Peter, who's the physician at Ananda Village, who runs the clinic there, we think of the context. I hope I'm saying this accurately. I believe it was antihistamine, the chemical medicine like that. In any case, Master specifically took credit for inspiring the scientist who discovered that particular category of medicine. And when Dr. Peter heard that, whatever the specific was, if my details are wrong, he remarked that whatever that category was, it opened a whole world of medicine. It was like a key discovery that caused people to be able to know all kinds of things about caring for the body. So we live in a very positive age, whereas before, physical body would be taken away at a much younger age. But now, because of all the technological discovery, you see, we're not really inventing, we're discovering. We're becoming more aware of how it works and how we can work with it and fix it. Because the physical body is worth preserving. When this woman in our community many years ago, she had AIDS at a time when AIDS was just starting. And as a consequence, it was a death sentence. And she lived quite a bit longer, but she had to do a lot, work with a lot of medicine and so on. And she sort of said to Swamiji, she'd had several out-of-body experiences, and death held no fear for her. So she said to him, "Sir, it's having like a low-grade, I feel like I have a low-grade flu all the time." She said, "Should I keep trying to live?" And Swamiji was so practical. He said, think how long it takes to get onto the spiritual path. First, you have to be a baby, then a child, then you have to be an adolescent, then you finally find your way, and usually you have some really horrible experiences as a young adult, and then finally you wake up, you get onto the spiritual path, you learn the practices, you're just getting going. He said, why just throw the body away at that point? You're just going to have to do the whole thing all over again. Just completely practical. He said, as long as you can he said also, as long as you can practice Kriya, but what he meant by that was, as long as you feel you can still make dynamic spiritual progress, he said you should stay in your body as long as you can. And at the point at which you can tell, it's more of an obstacle than an aid. That's the point. I've been with a number of people who've passed away. It's just one of those things that is one of the karmas that I've had. And you just never know. You can't really apply to it some dogmatic standard. You have to, it's just very intuitive. It's exactly like And I've never given birth, and I haven't yet died in this body, obviously. But I've been present also at a number of births. And so often, everybody has it all planned out. Who's going to be there, where it's going to happen, what music is going to be playing, like this. And then the baby laughs at you because he's not their plan at all. And it just happens the way it happens. And so it is when people pass away. It's just there's a point at which the karma's done. And then there's that last exhalation, and that's just the end of the story. Now, what happens also, now this is where I was thinking about it today. It's like, what's going on in this world, especially what everybody else out there thinks is going on in this world, and this is the way it's always been. Out of 1,000, one seeks God. That's what Krishna says. And out of 1,000 who seek, only one really has the power to realize in this lifetime. We are a very, very, very small minority. Of course, we're in a rising age, so it's a little better, but nonetheless, this is just still, this is not a planet. We're not in the astral world. This is not a planet where everybody is seeking God. It's just, this is a material plane. Swami Kriyananda raised an interesting question too, because so many of the great spiritual figures in our living memory, in our historical memory, have a very strong relationship with this line of gurus. Yogananda said that he was Arjuna and that Babaji was Krishna. Swami became very convinced that Master was Jesus. And Master himself said that Lahiri, Sri Yukteswar, and Babaji were the three wise men who came to see the baby in the manger. I mean, these are stories that one can't verify, but wow, that's interesting, isn't it? Lahiri Mahashaya was, I believe, Kabir in a previous incarnation. On and on it goes. Swami just proposed this as an interesting idea. I wonder if the whole planet, if this group of gurus has been responsible for this planet for a really long time. And their sense of time is very different than ours. We think a few thousand years is a long time. In fact, Daniel Brinkley, who was very dedicated to death and return and helping people with conscious dying, a more conscious attitude toward dying, he was often asked, because he would talk so blissfully about, because he'd had these experiences about what it's like to die, which is where you just take off your body and keep going, just like taking off a heavy overcoat because the weather's gotten warmer. You just take it off and go back into the sunshine. That's what it is to leave your body. And then he would be asked, a weeping daughter, doesn't my mother miss me? Because of course you want to feel that the love continues. And he said, oh yes, of course, the love is still there, but time is so different. He said, on this side, you live for 30 or 40 more years. So it seems like a very long cycle. He said, on the other side, he said the separation lasts about this long. And then in a very exaggerated way, he blinked his eyes once. He said, that's what the separation feels like. The mind just doesn't go there. You don't know how to think about that. So you think about thousands of years, it seems like a long time. But it's a long project to bring disciples, even one disciple, to liberation. And the whole drama is just each one of us, one like this, just one. That's why Master writes, I will come again and again, 1 trillion times if necessary, with bleeding feet over crags of suffering, he says, as long as one stray brother is left behind. Swamiji even remarked that Master had several incarnations where he was a king in Spain when the Moors were coming in and were going to drive Christianity out through Spain and through Europe, and he incarnated as Fernando III and drove the Moors out and protected that continent. And as Krishna driving Arjuna, and Yogananda was Arjuna, into warfare, and William the Conqueror into warfare, And Swami said, well, one of the reasons that Master took those incarnations is because he had disciples who needed that experience, and he wanted to be there to help them through it. You know, it's a very different story, my friends. It's a very different story. And then these masters come. Yogananda lands here. He lands on this planet. Then he comes to America. He writes Autobiography of a Yogi. He publishes it toward the very end of his life. 1946, that book was published. That book just goes on and on and on and on. And Jesus' life and his disciples wrote the Gospels, and it goes on and on and on. Krishna tells Arjuna on the field of battle, the Gita, and it goes on and on and on. And they come, and they basically say, hello, wake up. Take your dead baby to your neighbor's house and find a place where there is no death. But I want my baby to live. Well, yeah, sure, that sounds like a good plan. Go find a family that is not touched by death. Good luck, honey. Almost nobody listens. But when you do hear it, when somehow you have sufficient life experience that you're born again and you haven't forgotten. It's just as simple as that. It's gone deep enough that you can remember. Something happens, and it's just, it doesn't look to you. This life does not look to you like it looks to everyone else. And I remember that from a very young age. I just remember they're asking the wrong questions. Don't ask me, do I want to be a lawyer or a doctor or a professor, or which college do I want to go to? Who gives a damn, really? Who cares? My question is, what is happening here? Who am I? Doesn't anybody have a real answer? And they do. There are real answers. Sri Yukteswar. He just stands there. And he just radiates that which is. And you can throw yourself against him in all the ways you want to, and he'll pat you on the head and just ask you, how's that working for you? Have you found the house that's untouched by death? And you see, this is not solemn. This is great news. This is a fantastic news, because there is the longing of our hearts for perfect love, the longing for freedom, to break the confining. It took me a long time to figure out what it was that I really wanted. My original plan in life was to have many, many children. I deeply respected motherhood, and I was just at the generation where if you decided to be a mother, you didn't have a career, and that seemed very nice to me, because careers seemed really boring to me. And then I met Swami Kriyananda, and almost overnight, instantly, I realized, oh my God, what I want is expansion. What I want is to escape from the confines of this tiny egoic identification. And I had this horrible realization that having children would not make me a better person. I would just be exactly who I was with children. And it was deeply distressing. But then Swamiji exemplified by his own consciousness. Because you see, it doesn't happen by it all organizing itself in accordance with the rules of this world. It's the realization that the rules of this world, as most people see them, are childish. That there's a completely other reality. And Swami just walked in, showed it to me. That's what I want, just like that. And I realized I wanted to break the confines of just being ruled by birth and death, birth and death, birth and death, fulfillment and disappointment, endless alternating between the dualities to come to the freedom of the one. So we celebrate the passing of these great souls because we're celebrating their existence. Someone has come, someone who knows, and all we have to do, just like the Bible says, to all those who received him, to them gave he the power to become the sons of God. That is the promise. God bless you.